This one has much less liquid, so it should work slightly quicker. Apple cider or apple juice. I know most people don't want to buy a gallon of apple cider when all they need is 8 ounces, right? This is the closest thing you will find to apple cider. It's much more flavorful than apple juice. It's much, I don't want to say thicker, but it's got more of a body to it. Anybody who drinks wine understands body. Apple juice is very watery, very thin consistency. This has slightly more mouthfeel to it. We are going to add everything, again, except for our raisins and our cornstarch. Our cornstarch,
What's the brand?
this is Simple Organic, or Simple Apple. Let me pour it in this pan and then I'll pass it around so everyone can look at it. The recipe calls for about 8 ounces. This is about 13 in here, so we'll leave a tiny bit left. All right, so we have our apple juice in here. Yes, I did find that in the juice aisle. It is in, if you go down the last aisle in the store, it's in the last glass case all the way in the far back corner. On the top shelf, they have all sorts of flavors. There's apple, orange, pink grapefruit, raspberry lemonade, things like that. To our apple cider, I'm sorry, we are going to add brown sugar. What you're smelling is this orange. It's that orange and the cinnamon and the cinnamon buns that are in there. Okay. Now with this, the brown sugar will actually help thicken this. Apple brandy we are not allowed to use. Cinnamon. 1/4 teaspoon is not very much cinnamon. Okay. But it's not that much stuff. And with the apple cider versus the apple juice, apple cider usually has cinnamon in it, so it will help flavor that as well. Okay? Again, if you want more or less, doesn't matter. Cinnamon sticks will also work for this recipe versus powdered cinnamon. I wanted to do both just so you could see the difference in the two. Vanilla extract. Our raisins will go in last. To check a sauce, to see as it's thickening, a metal spoon works best. If you run your spoon through it and then turn it over, you'll see it start to coat the back of the spoon. The faster it runs off, the thinner it is. As it thickens, it will hold its shape more and you'll actually be able to run your finger through it and see it stay with shape as well as the line through the center. That one's starting to thicken and this one's starting to boil. What's the best way to mix cornstarch?
Put in a little bit of cold water.
What utensil works best? Your fingers.
What? I use a whisk. I use a whisk.
Your fingers. And I'll tell you why. Because you can feel it. It's going to clump if you don't have enough water in it. And you can add water, slower increments. You just use your first finger and your thumb, and you can actually break the lumps up instantly. When you use a whisk, it kind of sticks in the corners, gets a little hard to reach. You always end up with a little bit left in the bottom. With this, you can run your finger clean around the bottom of the bowl, and you'll feel it start to clump a little bit here and there, and you just continue to break it down. It works better than any whisk or fork or spoon you will ever have. We're going to take our spoon while this is boiling and we're going to slowly add it to it. And it should start to thicken pretty quickly because there's not a lot of liquid here. Don't ever pour all your cornstarch in at once. This is going to thicken instantly as we're doing it. If you pour it in too much, you can't get it back out. So if you add it slowly and you say, "Hey, wait, that's thick enough," great. If it's not, you can continue to add to it. Kind of like bacon though, if you do it all at once, not much you can do to fix it. You can see the back of the spoon on that camera up there. It's starting to get thick. And if I take my finger right through the center of it, it'll clean the space off, but it stays on both sides of the spoon. And it's almost to the point where it's a syrupy, kind of scrape it off half the consistency. That would be good, but why not?
Make it bigger so we can get more.
Let's make it a little stickier. Now, especially if you're going to put this over something good for you like ice cream, the thicker the better. I think that's thick enough. Now, if by chance you do make it too thick, you can thin it back down with water or apple juice or any other form of liquid. And this is about ready. The only thing we have left to do is add our raisins. I try and break them up before I put them in there. Just one less thing you got to do with the spoon. Sometimes these clumps of raisins get stubborn and they don't like to play very well with others. And again, it all depends on how much you like raisins. 2 ounces is what the recipe calls for. If you're a fan, put a box in there. If you're not a fan, you don't have to put any in there. It will work the same either way. I'm going to put this in this little tiny metal bowl, and the reason I'm going to do that is because metal won't break with hot items, and I can put it down in the freezer and it'll help cool it down faster. And then we'll put it into something larger when we actually need to work with it. If you ever need to cool something quickly, the smaller quantities you can make, the faster it will cool. This is just the water our raisins were in, so we can use that for the rest of this. And then once they cool, we'll mix them both back together, make sure it's all the same temperature and it's even. As it cools, I'm sorry, it should thicken as well. Nope, this one. All right, now that these have chilled, you can see how syrupy they are. The colder that gets, it will continue to thicken, but I don't want to get too cold because then it turns into jelly. And we don't want jelly, we want something we can pour over. I'll need that. Now when you're doing your sauces, the easiest way to tell how it's completely done and if it's ready is take a small spoon, put it in a corner, and then run your spoon through it and watch what happens. As you do that, if you can see that behind me on that counter, see how it holds its shape? Okay. It will run, it'll pour, it'll drip from the spoon, but it's also still thick enough to hold shape. Okay. Now when this happens, to be in relative with something you're more familiar with, it's very similar to syrup. Because syrup will do the same thing the warmer it gets. Right? It'll hold its shape. Some lighter syrups will run, but it gives you a reference point. That's about how thick this is going to taste when you actually bite into it. Always. You can't go wrong with raisins and sugar and cinnamon buns. There's that first one.